Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to tell you that recently I graduated from reading Harry Potter to Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And it was amazing. It was an amazing journey. And I think it's really important for me at this age, especially to graduate to higher books of higher meaning. I would like to share to you what it means to me graduating from Harry Potter to something as great as Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. When I used to read Harry Potter, I used to escape into a phantasmagorical world. The first time I read Harry Potter was when my classmate gave me the first Harry Potter book, which is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I I started reading it avidly whenever I used to get break times, and I ended up loving it because it introduced me to a world that I had never experienced before, full of fantasy, magic, spells, wands, everything of that sort. I really used to love reading about Harry's adventures with his friends. And every year I used to get a new book on my birthday. So because I wanted to know more, I used to read the same novel again and again and again. I must have read each of the books at least 5 times. I used to remember my favorite moments and go through the books again and again and again. That was how much I loved it. Now, when I came to my grandfather's house in Trivandrum, I we always read usually more difficult books higher than my standard. So he introduced me to what he said was one of the greatest novels. It's actually a Russian one, but still, he's written in English. So we usually read big books and we try to finish them. And I was not very enthusiastic about reading Crime and Punishment. Number one, because all these great novels, they start off pretty slow and then they soon get very interesting. So I was not too enthusiastic to read, but I read on my tab. My grandfather downloaded it. I kept on reading it and I finished it. And only then I've realized how much effort went into that book. It had such deep meaning and it had incidents from Raskolnikov, the main character's life, where he murdered two women and he was plunged into an ocean of guilt after that. And his guilt was so unbearable and he got so desperate that he himself went and confessed, which I was very surprised at because no criminal just admits that they've committed a crime. This actually surprised me so much because I saw how much suffering he was in. I understood that guilt is something that can make people do the most unthinkable things. Guilt can make you confess anything, even if it's the most terrible crime. It oppresses you and it depresses you, and that depression starts to grow on you, and you become so desperate in time that you just confess. That was unlike any book I've ever read because it dealt with reality in a way that many books don't read deal with reality, and they just read normally, and the most moving part of the book was a sentence. Actually, most people think it'll be a paragraph or a chapter, but for me it was a sentence. It portrayed Raskolnikov and a girl whom he developed a relationship with in a very remarkable way, and they are reading uh, St. John's Gospel, 11th chapter. It's about the raising of Lazarus, and together they're sitting, and the way Dostoevsky portrayed it, he portrayed it through the candlelight. It was so beautiful, and my grandfather, especially, he loves books which have a biblical touch to them because he says that it's very important. It gives us lots of values, and it was so interesting that I got hooked onto it. Once I read the last page, I thought it ended very abruptly. It was just saying that he was in prison. Yes, he was sentenced to prison for 8 years, and it was in Siberia, which actually was a coincidence because he wanted to go to Siberia after he had confessed his crime. After he stayed in prison for a couple of years, Sonia, the girl whom I told you was reading with him, uh, she also came, and she was almost like a mother to the prisoners because she used to visit every day and talk to them, make sweets for them. But that being in prison actually for Raskolnikov was more happier than anything to be in prison because in his house the conditions were so poor. Sometimes he would go without eating for two or 3 days, but at prison he used to get food every day. For him, prison was almost like paradise because it it almost it the guilt vanished because he knew he was getting punished rightly for what he was doing, and all the guilt disappeared and he was so free. But the moments that worried Sonia when he was just so quiet and he used to be in deep thought to think what would happen. The only person whom he confessed his crime to before confessing it to the police was Sonia because he trusted her so much because she became a ministering angel to him and just brought a new touch of spirituality in his life. Book ends by saying that when he was in prison, it led to a great spiritual regeneration of him, and his life changed, and he began new life with Sonia. Now, since I've been talking about both books, I want to say what I found better in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. First of all, as my grandfather says, we have to push ourselves more than our limit to find out greater things. A child whom what more than she can do is not demanded will actually end up doing less than expected or what she can do. So once he made me read that book, I was so happy. I went to him and I said, Apicha, I finished Crime and Punishment. I really loved it. And it actually helps you enhance your vocabulary because there were lots and lots of new words that I didn't know until now. So I used to go and ask him what the meaning of it was. And he used to explain to me very patiently that too, which I don't think any other teacher would do. I don't think any other teacher has the same patience. Even though my grandfather is very old, he has tremendous patience, even though he has aches, pains. And sometimes me and my sister, we really don't appreciate that. We should be able to try to learn as much as possible when it's convenient for him and what do the maximum. Actually, for us, weekends are when we do the maximum work because we're at home most of the time. We go to summer camp otherwise, and we're at home so we can read in the morning, read in the afternoon. And one thing about him is he doesn't force to do anything. He will say, if he's traveling, he will say, if you want, you start reading. Otherwise, you can do it when I come back. So now I've started reading Les Miserables, a very, very famous French classic, which is written by Victor Hugo. And even in the first chapter, I came across so many different words. And I think that's the magic of authors. They each have their own touch. And when I looked through a few classics in our small library which we have at the top of our house. I thought each when I looked at Dickens, it was a whole other style. Dickens has more of an irony than straightforward. He has lots of irony, but very great novels. And while it helps enhance your vocabulary, it also introduces you to different styles. How you can, if you want to be an author, how you can write better. And that's what I think is really great about these all classics, which really push you to your limit. If you are, especially if you are uh, almost a child like me, who's never been in. I actually, my school has done a play on Les Miserables, so I know the basis of the story. It's a very tragic story, and I actually recommend all of you, even children, if they're interested, to read these two books, Crime and Punishment and Les Miserables. This will almost transform your life. I never thought that reading classics could be so deep and so infectious. Once you start reading, you get gripped onto it. You can't stop. At least that's what the case was with me. Because I never thought that any author could portray magic as well as J.K. Rowling. But once I read Dostoevsky, I realized that instead of portraying magic, people can portray literature in a way that it feels like they have done magic on your eyes. And with that, I dedicate this to the children and parents of the world, and I encourage them to tell their children to read these books, and I'm sure it'll end up in great results. Thank you.